With these calls, I'm going to kind of harken back to my original days with Embody Your True Center. And when we would do our live calls, the first thing that I would typically start with is a little bit of orienting. And this is often called a nervous system practice or a regulation practice. I was sharing how Megs and I had been outside in the pool, and I can feel the grit of the dirt in between my toes that I've yet to clean. The back of my dress is just a little bit wet from her spraying me with the water squirt gun thing that she had. The sun, we're like in that golden hour light here in Wisconsin. So it's really warm light and sunlight coming in to my left. And the house is quiet, which is really nice. So that's my sense of place coming into the end of my day. Really grateful to be here with each of you. And we have 3 simple agreements for our time together. And you can just wave a hand or give me a Zoom emoji to show that, yes, I'm in agreement with this. So the first one is that we trust there's something here for us, right? Like we're showing up, allowing ourselves to participate, to engage, to ask questions, to do the practices, trusting that there's a way for us to grow, heal, learn, move forward. Okay, so in agreement, there's something here for me, and we'll figure out what that is as we go. Okay, so we're not stuck, right? We're not stuck. We're not going to stay the same from here forward or for the rest of our lives. And it can feel that way sometimes when we've had maybe long-standing health concerns, long-standing pelvic symptoms, or maybe we've been given a label or a diagnosis or a prognosis that maybe is upsetting. So just know that I believe that there's always something that we can do to care for ourselves and figure out a path forward for improvement, right? It might not be elimination of symptoms or like we never suffer or have pain or have that symptom again until, the day that we're out of this body, right? I can't promise that, but I do really firmly believe that there's something here for us when we connect deeply with ourselves, with other women, and into our bodies. And our pelvic bowl is a really fruitful place for us to learn about and embrace. Okay. The second agreement for our time together is that we are taking in and implementing whatever it is that is here for us tonight through the lens of self-compassion, not through a lens of self-judgment or criticism or wishing to change our body out of a disgust or shame or hatred or whatever it might be, right? So allowing yourself that checkpoint of, okay, if I'm going to make a habit or if I'm going to make a change from tonight based on what I'm learning, may it be from a root of kindness, a root of self-compassion, that we are learning to hold ourselves with that positive regard. Yes? Yoo-hoo! Good. Third and last one I already mentioned is simple confidentiality, that what gets shared here stays here. It doesn't get shared to your spouse, to your girlfriends, whatever it is. And if you have referrals, people that want to be in this work, in this practice, could benefit from this as well. Of course, you can share your personal story, your personal experience, but we're not sharing other people's experiences or stories. Yes? Private, confidential, we're in. All right, good. So this book, this is the second time today I'm going to read from Wild Feminine. And I had the honor of meeting Tammy about 6 weeks ago when we were in Oregon and had a session with her myself, an internal pelvic care and energy session, which was otherworldly, was divine. So she writes, this personal journey is the basis for global transformation. Each of us making our way back to ourselves, forging the tools that enable our passage. Awakening to the most feminine part of our bodies, we are beginning to heal and nurture our wild femininity. Restoring this bodily connection to the feminine, we are opening the channel for spirit and radiant energy to flow more readily into our lives. Together, we're planting seeds that will grow to nourish the soul of the wild feminine in our culture at large. Oof, love it, right? So we have our individual work to do, which is not separate from the culture at large, the dominant culture of productivity, capitalism, patriarchy, etc. There's a lot of things I would like to see change in the world. And yet I know my place is not like lobbying for large scale organizational political change. That doesn't feel like my role. And so I always want to anchor our personal practice back into the fact that if we are moved, if we are touched, if we are changed, that hopefully that ripples out into our marriage, into our relationships, into our communities in some positive way. And we each have to figure out what our role is in that. Okay. So that was Wild Feminine, Pammy Kent. Okay. I'll mention that this call is free and open for everyone. Again, the recording will stay in the members portal. And I have 6 places remaining for spring enrollment of the online program, Embody Your True Center. So if you are not already a member and you want to join, I can share that link with you in email or a message after tonight. And I'd love to have you. That way you get the self-paced online pre-recorded program. You can move through it in the comfort of your own home. There's anatomy lessons, breathing lessons, many different practices. And I've added in a lot of material from the book writing process into the program since its original form. So it has been pretty wildly updated. And with that spring enrollment, there'll be another group support circle similar to this for members only in May. Okay, so small plug because we have to do this work, right? Like one call is a seed, it's a starting point. It's hopefully going to sprout something in you from tonight. But then we have to tend to those seeds. We have to water them. We have to weed out the weeds. We've got to check that they're getting what they need to then have a harvest later on. We tend the landscape of our bodies day in, day out for the rest of our lives because they have needs. Our animal bodies have needs. So we continue to come home to ourselves through our practice, through our awareness. Okay. Last but not least, I'm going to read a tiny poem, a short poem from my book, Pelvic Yoga Therapy for the Whole Woman Professional Guide. And this was shared or printed with permission by Donna Falls. And it's at the opening of chapter 10, which is titled Being. So there's lots of things we can be doing, and our dominant culture says, do more, do it all, try everything, do this supplement, plus that supplement, plus this diet, plus no, do that diet. No, do that. This is the perfect exercise. No, wait, that's not the perfect exercise. There's so much misinformation and so many resources available now through social media and the internet and Googling for ourselves to try to self-diagnose, which is not all bad. I'm a fan that we have more access to information, but I hope that we filter all that doing, again, back through the potency of this is about me in my awareness, my embodied practice, and there needs to be maturity and discernment within that so that we're making clear, discerning choices about what we implement and whether it's working for us or not, being able to take action and take in, digest, assimilate, and like the root of the pelvic floor, also eliminate, shed, let go of the things that no longer are working well for us when our symptoms say otherwise, or if we enter a different life stage, or we are presented with a different circumstance, we hopefully can respond with that. Okay. So the being underlies all the doing. So this is called Go In and In by Donna Falls. Go in and in, be the space between two cells, the vast resounding silence in which spirit dwells. Be sugar dissolving on the tongue of life. That's my favorite line. Dive in and in as deep as you can dive. Be infinite, ecstatic truth. Be love, conceived and born in union. Be exactly what you seek. The beloved, singing yes, tasting yes, embracing yes, until there is only essence. The all of everything expressing through you as you. Go in and turn away from nothing that you find. So that line, be sugar dissolving on the tongue of life, is just like so good to me, and invokes our senses and our desire, our sense of pleasure. We can bring that topic in tonight, although I'm not going to explicitly focus on pleasure or sexual wellness tonight. That's a welcome topic. And it's nourishing for us, right? Being able to soak in the goodness of life, whether it is birdsong in the morning that we hear or actual, self-touch, arousal, sexual pleasure. Anywhere on that spectrum of presence, sensuality, sexuality, it's nourishing for us, right? It brings blood flow, it brings nutrients into the pelvic bowl and throughout the tissues of the pelvic bowl. And so allowing ourselves to be awakened in that way is a pelvic floor practice, right? Sometimes we separate it out for whatever reason, and there's cultural layers to that and conditioning to that, which again, we're not going to dive into tonight, but I always want to root back into the goodness, especially when we're dealing with symptoms where it's like, oh gosh, would this just go away already? Why does this keep happening to me, or whatever it might be, right? Like coming back to the fact that, okay, I'm alive and my body's at least doing many, many things right without my conscious control, including our pelvic floor. There's a lot of things that it's doing well or doing correctly for us without us having to think about it. And then the momentary things or concerns, questions that we have, we'll see what kind of solutions we can come up with tonight. Okay? So let's do a little practice, tiny little grounding practice. You can set your notebook aside. If you're in a chair, that works. If you're sitting on the floor, that works. So give yourself a moment to settle in. If you want to take off glasses or dim the lights, go ahead. I hear my child. One of two children. I'm going to close the door quick. Good. So wherever you are sitting, and if you're in a chair, feel free to scoot towards the front of your chair so that your feet can meet the ground. Take these first few moments to gather your attention into yourself. So we've set a foundation, had some agreements, some poetry, some insights. Let all of that for now kind of filter into the background. Imagining that your attention, your consciousness can become consolidated around your body and merge into your body. And know that these first few moments, there's no agenda, there's no expectation. I want you to observe yourself as you are. Noticing your sensations, the parts of you that your attention is drawn to, and be curious about why. Maybe there's a part of you that feels tense, part of you that feels easeful. Maybe there's a quality to your pulse or your breathing. So take in, observe the totality of you in physical form for a few brief moments. Letting in your sensations as clues, as information. And then if you haven't already allowed your awareness to settle into your pelvic bowl or down into your roots, your sit bones, take a few moments to gather your attention more specifically, more regionally down through your center. Noticing if your attention can easily flow there. As your attention settles into your pelvic bowl, notice if you can actually sense and feel this part of your body. And again, gathering information or clues. What do I notice? What's the quality of awareness, quality of sensation that I feel in this part of me right now? Spend one more breath cycle observing, listening. And then allow yourself to notice the room around you, the sounds you hear. Let your eyes eventually blink open. And, and if it works, if it's convenient enough, I'll have you share in the chat maybe your top 2 observations. So the most prominent sensations or the most interesting clues, the sensations that you noticed first, or maybe the ones that were more persistent or intense, or maybe there was an absence of sensation, absence of felt sense information from your body. So there's really no wrong answer. There's also no right answer. It's totally personal and individual. And this is the essential skill that I alluded to. Thank you for being honest. This is the essential skill that I alluded to in the email newsletter that I sent today, right? Our ability to focus our attention and our ability to sense, feel, perceive what is going on in our body. This is often called interoception, right? Our ability to access our felt sense, our sensations, so that we can get accurate information about what we're noticing. And then through practice, we get better and better at perceiving accurately and more skillful about then responding, right? But rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to sign up for this program because it says it's the top 10 pelvic floor exercises for incontinence, right? That's a big generalization. And incontinence can be really different from person to person. The root cause can be different from person to person. So again, our ability to feel and then respond, to choose what we're going to take, what we're going to leave. Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we're going to drop back in for practice. In a yoga class, quote unquote yoga class, we would go seamlessly step by step, but I'm gathering clues from you to help me then support you when it comes time to share. Okay. So drop back into your awareness. And if you'd like, you can put your hands somewhere low on your belly or on your pelvic bones. Find a place that's comfortable for you. Feel free to sit on a bolster or a chair. You could also stand if you feel sleepy. So I'll let you decide what you feel is going to work best for you. And we're going to do a little movement, pendulating forward and back. So from your seat, you're going to start to move your weight forward towards your pubic bone. You'll kind of roll on your sit bones forward and then roll on your sit bone back towards your tail. If you're standing, just take a little bend in your legs so that you can freely move your pelvis back and forth. So letting the pelvis roll forward and roll back. Acknowledging your sit bones against the chair as well as the space between your sit bones. That is your tissues, skin, vulva, pelvic floor tissues deep underneath, making contact with the bolster or the chair. So you might feel one sit bone more than the other. See if you can use your tailbone kind of like a rudder to steer you right down the midline. Little roll forward, little roll back. Let your breathing join in with the movement. And when you roll your pelvis forward, the next time, pause there. Maybe your eyes lift up, feel your chest open, and acknowledge how your tail has swept back. There's a little widening tail back, pelvic floor opening. Then as you exhale, eyes down, chin down, roll the tail, the sit bones forward, and you'll feel a gathering and narrowing quality. Go one more time each direction. So tail sweeps back, sit bones wide, big inhale. Maybe even a little wiggle waggle of your tail. And then exhale, scoop under, gathering, narrowing. You might feel your pelvic floor engage a little bit. And then sweep back. Find your 50-50. Where are my sit bones? Right underneath me. So we're not bearing weight into the tail or sacrum. We're right on the sit bones, or centered, pelvis over your feet if you're standing. Good. And then we're going to do a little self-touch. You're going to come around to your sit bone. So I'm just cupping my hand right around, right under. Mary, up to you if you want to do this standing, you can. Or if you want to come back to your chair, either one. Okay. So with one hand under your sit bone, one side on purpose so that we can compare and contrast afterwards. So you're sitting on your hand. If that doesn't work for your wrist or your shoulder, you could sit on a washcloth or some kind of soft prop. You're going to circle that sit bone into your hand. Little bit of circular movement of that sit bone, and you might hook your fingers gently around the contours of the sitting bone. Little bit of gentle pressure. It's less about intensity and more about intention. Can I feel the muscles around my sit bone softening, melting, broadening into my touch? So you feel the sit bone kind of rooting down more clearly into your touch. Good. If it feels okay to do so, bring your hand between the sit bone and the tailbone. So same side, between sit bone and tailbone. And in those deeper layers, we're going between tailbone and sit bone, through the glutes, through the piriformis, into the posterior, the back of the pelvic floor. So again, gently hook, gently palpate into that space. If you're too close to the tailbone or it's too tender, go next door. Go a little up, down, right, left, depending on what you notice. A little bit more circling and melting of those tissues. And then we're going to do 3 repetitions of a hip hike. So what I mean by that is you're going to pick that sit bone up and then set it back down into your hand. Whoa. And again, sit bone lifts up and sit bone roots down. Last one, sit bone lifts or levitates off the bolster or chair, and then really sit, really ground. Good. Sweep your hand out, shake it, let yourself be, and notice how you're sitting. Is your sitting different than when we first checked in? Little show of hands or a thumbs up if it's like, yeah, I feel a difference on that side, or I'm sitting maybe taller, or maybe the jaw shoulders released, maybe you feel wider on that side of your pelvis. Yeah, culturally, again, we're not going to unpack the layers, but there's a lot of tension in our culture, yes, and for various reasons, right? Let's do the other side. Because if there's muscles that are just clenched, guarded, gripped, held in a state of tension, it's hard for them to do their job well. They can't contract and release the way that they need to. So find your second sit bone, gentle cupping of your hand under the sit bone, little easy circular movement of the sit bone into your fingertips. You don't have to know the muscular anatomy. It's more exploration, experimentation. Like, okay, where's the bone I sit on? And if you can locate that, there's muscles attaching all around from the front, back, either side. And if we feel the inside contours or the interior edge of the sit bone, we're getting into the territory of the pelvic floor. So asking those muscles to melt, and even noticing if you start to feel jaw tension, do a little lion's breath, or make silly faces. And then releasing the face, neck, jaw to help you drop down into that sit bone. And again, moving towards the tailbone if that feels okay. So about maybe halfway between sit bone and tip of tailbone. And in that space is the deep pelvic diaphragm, like a fanning of muscles from the back into the front of the pelvis. So we're going through the glutes, buttocks, piriformis into the deeper layers. You might gently hook your fingertips into that space, little easy circles. Asking those tissues to soften, to let go, to melt. And again, if there's tenderness or pain, do less or go next door. Find a place that's tolerable or even comfortable where you feel the release. Good. You can do a little cat-cow or pendulation like we started with. And then we do our 3 hip hikes. So we're going to shift weight into the other sit bone. The sit bone we're touching is going to levitate up, 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 and then ground. Sit back down. Only 3 times. Really smooth. See how easy can I make this? And as you try this last one, see if you can let your heart, your posture stay relatively still and really just move from your pelvis. Hike 1 hip up, you'll feel your waist shorten on that side, and then lengthen, root down, sit into that sit bone, like you're sending roots into the soil through the floor. Good, sweep your hand away, let it go. Notice what you noticed. If you feel like so supremely broad and seated and centered and grounded, thank you, you're welcome. If there was something else you're noticing, we can unpack that together if need be. But we are powerful. Our intention and attention, our minds are powerful. And using a little touch, a little movement that's really clear and skillful can create change just like that in short moments of time. And then we re-educate our body, right? We start to learn a new norm, a new way of, oh, what if I sat like that all the time? What if I could always feel so released, so grounded, so tall through my spine? How magical would that be to sit at your desk and write or work or whatever it might be? Okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to do just a tiny bit of education insights around assessing our needs. I mentioned that in the email outline for today. If you want a sip of water, feel free. If you want to change position anytime, feel free. If there's questions, you can always put them into the chat. Or after this next little segment, then we'll go into some personal Q&A and time to share, okay? So first and foremost, and if you have a copy of my book, this is outlined in chapter 8, I believe. One sec. Yes, chapter 7 and 8, if you want to dig into that. There's a chart that goes through the 5 qualities of a happy, functional pelvic floor. And the first one is awareness, right? So our capacity to actually connect with, sense, and feel our pelvic floor. And this is so surprising, maybe not surprisingly, but I'm finding it very reliably common that folks that I work with, sometimes that is their first starting point. There's an absence of sensation, there's a lack of sensation when they try to connect to their pelvic floor or pelvic bowl. There's a fuzziness in their attention, there's a disconnect. And maybe that's because of chronic pain, maybe that's because of a past trauma, and there's a protective survival instinct there that we very gently, very gradually want to titrate them back into relationship and connection with their body, right? Because that instinct of disconnect in certain events, certain experiences, is to protect us. Okay. So, whatever the reason might be, again, we're titrating little by little. Be here. Know that being here in your body is okay. It's a secure, safe, loving place and relationship. And bringing the awareness into the pelvic bowl so that we can actually feel what the heck is going on. It's really hard to change something if we cannot feel it. Okay. So connection and awareness are first. If you felt like that was available or accessible to you, then starting to discern, what is my pelvic floor baseline? And again, this is in chapter 7 and chapter 8 in my book. And the two pieces or insights that I'll speak to briefly tonight is the continuum of activity, or tonicity, sometimes it's called, in the pelvic floor muscles. So we can have an overactive, or what sometimes is called a non-relaxing pelvic floor, or we may have an underactive, a truly quote unquote weak pelvic floor that doesn't know how to connect, contract, engage. Okay. So that's a continuum. Rather than thinking black or white, it's one or the other. I want you to think of it as a continuum, as a spectrum, and that we can be anywhere on that spectrum in a moment, a snapshot of time. And often we have a pattern as to how this part of our body responds to daily life, daily stressors. Overwhelmingly, in my own client work, from past members of the program, as well as one-on-one clients, workshops, etc., conversations with my main mentor, Shelley Prosco, conversations with other pelvic specialists and providers, overwhelmingly the preferred state, quote unquote preferred state, or prevalent state, I should say, is the non-relaxing state, the overactive pelvic floor muscles, which means they are holding on. They're clenched or guarded. There's a guardedness in those muscles, which again we might equate tension to strength, like, oh, well, when my muscles are working all the time, of course they're strong. But when a muscle is held, like if we clenched our fist all day long, our hand would get tired, right? We would fatigue those muscles and our knuckles would get white. There would not be blood flow in and out of that area as there should be if it is clenched and held in one static position all the time, right? So allowing ourselves, if we think that we tend towards, or that our dominant pattern is the non-relaxing state, the overactive pelvic floor state, our first line of defense, so to speak, in our practice is build connection and awareness, and then build relaxation and excursion, coordination. We need to allow and learn how to let those tissues move so that they get nourished, they get circulation, nourishment in, waste out on a tissue level, cellular level, and for our nerves as well, that the nerves are not clammed down and impinged and getting irritated, causing urgency, frequency, pain, etc. And again, blood flow to the nerves themselves as well. So movement is life, pelvic floor included. Movement is life. Some clues that your pelvic floor state or tone or baseline might be that overactive, non relaxing state. If you have chronic pelvic pain of any kind, if you have bladder urgency, frequency, itchiness, burning, what might feel like an infectious process, but there's no infection, you've had that checked out. That might be nerve irritation. It might be that static, stagnant quality in the tissues that are asking you for release and nourishment and range of motion, a coordinated excursion with the breath, movement, and flow in the pelvic bowl. Okay. So we've talked through chronic pain, bladder urge, frequency, itching, burning, that sort of sensation. If there's swelling and or pressure, if there's backed up lymph flow and venous return in the lower extremities, that can also point towards more stagnant qualities in the pelvic bowl, that there's not a clear channel for blood and lymph to go through the pelvic bowl back to the abdomen. If there's straining with bowel movements or constipation. Okay, so those are all, or pain with sex. That's the last one I'll mention, pain with intercourse or sexual activity. Those are all clues that point towards the possibility or the strong likelihood that your pelvic floor tissues are in that guarded, overactive state. And we need to learn safety, security on a whole person, systemic, mind body level, as well as local pelvic awareness and relaxation so that those tissues get movement and circulation and nourishment. Okay. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Little horse lips if you need one. So just check in with your body and notice, like, okay, how is this landing so far? Does this feel true for me or not? Or where on the spectrum? It's like, absolutely true. I feel 100% like, yo, that's me. I'm waving my hand. Or like, oh, it's partially true, but I'm not sure about X, Y, or Z. Right? So identifying or assessing ourselves. Okay, good. Last but not least, if you are thinking that you're on the opposite side of the spectrum, which again, I have found much more rare in my work with folks and with conversations of other providers and specialists, if we're truly on that weak or underactive side, we may be in our postpartum time, we may be in peri and postmenopausal kind of newness of those hormonal changes. There may have been an injury or surgery or some kind of damage specifically to the pelvic tissues. If we have an inactive or sedentary lifestyle, right, there may be true need for strength in the tissues where we take a more active, robust approach from straight out of the gate, right? Versus someone that tends towards the pain, urgency, et cetera, of the overactive pelvic floor. We want to regulate, typically down regulate the nervous system, release the pelvic tension so that we get movement and coordination again. Then the next phase, once that's established, can be more active strength. So it's not that we can't be moving right off the bat. We all need movement. But in terms of specific pelvic floor muscle training or what's called Kegling, we might want to avoid that in our initial treatment or initial phase of practice if we tend towards overactivity. We might want to take a more whole body integrative approach so that our movement health, bone health, etc., stays intact. But we don't necessarily need to go straight to Kegling or pelvic floor muscle training if we're having those overactive related type symptoms. Okay. All right. So we all need awareness. Amen. Hallelujah. The ability to connect with and feel what's going on in our bodies. We all need relaxation. Amen. Hallelujah. Anyone in a caregiver role or whatever it might be, right? There's a lot going on in our world. There's a lot of rapid change going on, which can feel unsettling to our nervous system. And many folks through the initial COVID pandemic saw an uptick in their symptoms, their pelvic floor symptoms, or an onset of new symptoms, right? Because there was this sudden response to the world at large that felt scary, that felt unsure, uncertain. right? So we've got our collective cultural layers and our personal histories, our personal stories. And sometimes we need to tease those apart and figure out, like, okay, where do I start? And what can I best address right now as a starting point? So that's what we're going to dive into, is some time to share.